Everyone knows there are 4 houses. This is the first thing you learn at Hogwarts, before the spells, before the moving staircases, before the portraits and the ghosts, and the particular logic of a building that was designed by 4 people who disagreed about almost everything except the fact that disagreement, properly structured, produces something more durable than consensus. 4 founders, 4 philosophies, 4 sets of values carved into the institutional DNA of the most famous school of magic in Britain, and reproduced every September, when the sorting hat opens its brim and assigns 11-year-olds to the category that will define the next 7 years of their lives. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Slytherin. The names are so embedded in wizarding culture that they function as personality types, as social shorthand, as the first thing certain parents ask when their child comes home from a first term. Which one? As though the question has only 4 possible answers. As though the hat, in 1,000 years of operation, has never encountered a mind that didn't fit cleanly into one of the quadrants that Godric, Helga, Rowena, and Salazar drew between them in the school's founding years. Here is what the history books don't include. The hat hesitates. Not often, perhaps once in every 30 or 40 sortings, perhaps less. A hesitation that lasts longer than the usual pause, that produces in the hat's expression. If a hat can be said to have an expression, something that the watching students read as difficulty, and that is, in fact, something more specific than difficulty. Recognition. The hat recognizing a mind that it has encountered before. A category of student that the 4 houses were not designed to hold and have never, in 1,000 years of operation, held well. These students get sorted. They always get sorted. The hat cannot leave a student on the stool indefinitely, and the institutional pressure of 500 watching students and a staff table full of professors, and a great hall that has been running this ceremony since 990 AD, does not accommodate extended philosophical uncertainty. The hat makes a decision. The student walks to a table. The sorting moves on. But the decision is a concession, a placement rather than a classification. And the student who received it, who felt, in the 11 seconds the hat spent on their head, something that they will spend years trying to describe and never quite manage, carries the residue of that hesitation forward into 7 years at a school that was not, despite everything it offers, built for them. These students are not failures. They are not the rejects, the misfits, the ones who didn't quite make the cut for wherever they ended up. They are something more specific and more interesting than any of those categories. They are the ones whose minds the hat recognized as belonging to a tradition that predates the 4 houses, that was present at the founding and was not given a name, not because it wasn't valued, but because the person who valued it most understood that naming it would make it visible. And visibility, for what this house was meant to do, was the one thing it could not afford. Salazar, Slytherin sealed it before he left. Not in the chamber. Not in the dungeons. In the hat itself, a second set of instructions, a secondary sorting criterion, a category that the hat has been applying in parallel for 1,000 years without anyone knowing to ask about it. The house has no common room, no table in the Great Hall, no ghost, no colors, no motto carved in stone. It has only its students scattered across the 4 visible houses, living parallel lives in a school that doesn't know they're there. And it has a purpose that the other 4 houses, for all their centuries of history, were never designed to fulfill. This is the story of all 5. Starting with the 4, you know, ending with the one that knew you first. Part 1, Gryffindor, the house that runs toward things. This is the simplest and most accurate description of what Gryffindor selects for, not courage in the abstract, not bravery as a philosophical position, but the specific neurological disposition of someone whose first instinct, when confronted with something frightening, is forward motion rather than lateral reassessment. Gryffindors do not carefully evaluate the risk-reward ratio of the burning building before deciding whether to enter. They are already inside before the evaluation begins, and the evaluation happens, if at all, on the way up the stairs. The hat identifies this in approximately 4 seconds. It is one of the clearest signatures. It reads the orientation toward action, the particular relationship with fear that treats it as information rather than instruction. Gryffindors feel fear. This is important and frequently misunderstood. The house does not select for the absence of fear. It selects for the specific quality of response to fear that treats it as a signal to engage rather than withdraw. What this produces, across 7 years inside the red and gold, is a house culture built around the visibility of courage. The stories that circulate in the Gryffindor common room are action stories. Who faced what? Who held their ground? Who walked into the thing that everyone else was walking away from? This culture is genuine, and it produces genuinely remarkable people. It also produces a specific blind spot, the courage that doesn't make a good story. The student who tells a hard truth quietly. The one who stays rather than charges. The one whose bravery operates at a frequency that the common room doesn't amplify. These students are in Gryffindor. They belong there. But they belong there slightly sideways. Their version of the house's central value present, but expressed in a register the house doesn't fully recognize. The hat noted this when it sorted them. Filed it somewhere the 4 houses don't have access to. Part 2, Hufflepuff. The house that stays. Every other house has a quality that announces itself. Gryffindor's charge, Ravenclaw's precision, Slytherin's calculation. Hufflepuff's quality is quieter and more structural and more fundamental than any of the 3, which is why it is the most consistently underestimated house in the school, and has been since the founding. Helga Hufflepuff took the students the others didn't specifically want, and she did not consider this a consolation. She considered it a philosophy. The belief that consistency, loyalty, and the willingness to do the unglamorous work are not secondary virtues. They are the ones that hold everything else up. The hat reads this disposition quickly but carefully. Hufflepuff students are not people who lack ambition or courage or intelligence. The house contains all of these in significant quantities. What they have, additionally, is a relationship with reliability that the other houses don't select for as a primary criterion. They are people who finish things, who show up when showing up is the whole job, who build trust the slow way, through accumulated evidence rather than dramatic demonstration. The house's reputation for accepting everyone has always been somewhat reductive. Hufflepuff doesn't accept everyone. It recognizes a specific kind of strength that looks, to observers, optimized for different strengths, like the absence of distinguishing qualities. A Hufflepuff in a crisis is not the person who makes the speech or charges the barricade. They are the person who has been quietly preparing for the crisis for months, who knows where the supplies are, who has maintained the relationships that will hold the group together when the charge fails and the speech is over. Hogwarts has never fully honored this. The house has never fully minded. This patience, more than anything else, is what the hat recognized, and what it quietly noted alongside. Part 3, Ravenclaw. The house that questions. The common misconception about Ravenclaw is that it selects for intelligence, for the students with the highest marks, the best memory, the fastest grasp of new material. This is not what the hat is reading when it sorts a student into the blue and bronze. Intelligence is distributed across all 4 houses in roughly equal measure. What Ravenclaw selects for is something more specific, the disposition to find the question more interesting than the answer. Ravenclaws are not students who know more than the others. They are students for whom not knowing is a motivating state rather than an uncomfortable one. They sit with uncertainty differently, not tolerating it, but actively preferring it to a premature closure that might turn out to be wrong. This produces extraordinary thinkers and, occasionally, people who cannot stop refining an answer long enough to submit it. The house common room reflects this in its entrance mechanism. A riddle rather than a password, a question that requires thought rather than memory. This is not an aesthetic choice. It is an architectural statement about what the house values and what it expects its members to be comfortable with. A Ravenclaw who cannot answer the riddle sits outside the common room and thinks about it until they can. This is not considered a problem by anyone involved. What the hat notes in Ravenclaw students, what it files alongside their sorting, is the specific relationship between their questioning and their connection to other people. Some Ravenclaws question everything except the human in front of them, and their intellect becomes a form of intimacy. Others question everything, including the human in front of them, and their intellect becomes a form of distance. The house doesn't distinguish between these two types. The hat does. The distinction matters for what comes later. Part 4, Slytherin. The house that calculates. Salazar Slytherin's selection criterion, ambition, cunning, resourcefulness, the desire to achieve great things, is the one most frequently misread as a moral position. It is not. Ambition is not dark. Cunning is not cruel. The desire to achieve is not the desire to harm. These are neutral instruments, and what makes them dark or not dark is entirely a function of what they are pointed at and who is holding them. The hat reads Slytherin students with the most complex assessment of the four, because the quality it is selecting for is the most context-dependent. A Gryffindor's courage is readable in isolation. A Hufflepuff's loyalty is readable in isolation. A Ravenclaw's curiosity is readable in isolation. A Slytherin's ambition is readable only in relation to what surrounds it, what the ambition is for, what it is willing to use, what it considers acceptable cost. The hat sees all of this. The hat makes a judgment, quickly, in the seconds the brim rests on the student's head. What the house produces at its best is people who understand how systems work and how to move within them, who can read a room, identify the leverage points, build the alliances that produce outcomes. These skills are not taught in any Hogwarts classroom. They are cultivated by the house culture, by the specific social environment of the Slytherin common room, by 7 years of proximity to other people who operate on the same frequency. What the house produces at its worst is the same thing, minus the question of what it's for. Slytherin's founder understood this better than anyone, which is why he built something else underneath the house that bore his name, something that's selected for a different question entirely. Part 5, The Four Together. The founders disagreed about almost everything. This is documented in portraits, in the early histories, in the hat's own account of the school's founding that it delivers each September in its sorting song, edited for length and institutional sensibility. Godric wanted the brave. Helga wanted the loyal. Rowena wanted the clever. Salazar wanted the pure, which was the disagreement that eventually ended the collaboration, that sent him from the school with his chamber and his basilisk, and his centuries of retrospective vilification. What the histories record less carefully is what the four agreed on. They agreed on the hat, on the method of sorting, the single instrument, the intimate assessment, the decision made in the private space between the hat's perception and the student's mind. This agreement was not administrative convenience. It was philosophical. The four founders, despite their disagreements about what to select for, agreed that selection itself was the school's most important function, that the architecture of the community shaped the community more fundamentally than any curriculum. They agreed on the castle, on the living quality of it, the portraits, the staircases, the responsive magic of a building that was designed to know its inhabitants. Hogwarts is not a school that happens to be magical. It is a magical entity that happens to function as a school, and the distinction matters enormously for understanding how it operates and what it is actually doing across 7 years with the students inside it. And they agreed in the last meeting before everything broke apart on one thing that none of the histories record. Because the record was sealed, because Salazar asked for it to be sealed, and the other three agreed, and the hat, which was present, which is always present, which has been present since the beginning, was given the secondary instructions that none of them spoke aloud in any room that could be overheard. The fifth house was not Salazar's idea. It was all four of theirs. The one thing they built together, before they stopped being able to build anything together at all. Part 6, The Hidden House. It has no name that was ever written down. This is the first and most important fact about the fifth house, that its founders understood from the beginning that naming it would be the end of it. Names create visibility. Visibility creates targets. And the fifth house, from its conception in the last collaborative meeting of four people who were about to stop collaborating forever, was designed to be invisible, to operate inside the structure of the other four without being identifiable as a separate structure, to do its work in the gaps between the houses, in the spaces the other four didn't cover, in the students who fell through the categories. The hat has been selecting for it since the founding, not separately, not as a fifth option that students are sorted into instead of the four. Alongside, the hat sorts every student into one of the four houses, because every student needs a house, needs a common room, needs a table and a ghost, and a set of colors, and the social architecture that makes Hogwarts function. But for some students, for the ones whose minds carry the signature the fifth house was built to recognize, the hat also makes a second notation, an invisible one, a classification that exists in a layer of the hat's assessment that no professor has ever accessed, and no student has ever been told about. What does the fifth house select for? Not courage, not loyalty, not curiosity, not ambition, integration, the capacity to hold more than one of those things simultaneously without the holding producing contradiction. The Gryffindor, who is also genuinely cunning. The Slytherin, who is also genuinely loyal. The Ravenclaw, who is also genuinely brave in the Gryffindor sense, who charges rather than analyzes when charging is what the moment requires. The Hufflepuff, who is also genuinely ambitious, who wants to achieve great things, and whose reliability is the instrument of that achievement rather than a substitute for it. These students are rare, not because integration is impossible. Most people contain multitudes. Most people exceed their house's primary criterion in at least one direction. But the fifth house selects for something more specific than exceeding. It selects for the students in whom the integration is structural, who don't experience the different qualities as competing, but as cooperative, who have always understood instinctively that the house categories are descriptions of emphasis rather than boundaries of possibility. They are scattered across all four houses. In every cohort, in every year, in every generation of Hogwarts students since 990 AD, moving through the school's official architecture without knowing that they are also moving through a parallel one, having the experiences that the hat's secondary classification predicted they would have, the specific friction of being a Gryffindor, who is also deeply strategic, the specific isolation of being a Slytherin, who is also genuinely loyal to people outside the house, the specific loneliness of being a Ravenclaw, whose questions are ultimately about people rather than ideas. The fifth house cannot offer them a common room, cannot give them a table or a ghost or a set of colors, cannot tell them that the thing they have been quietly experiencing, the sense of belonging to their sorted house and also to something adjacent to it, something the house can't quite contain, is real, is recognized, is known. But the hat knew. In the 11 seconds it rested on your head, in the hesitation that lasted slightly longer than the others around you noticed, in the second notation, invisible, alongside the decision it announced aloud. The hat sorted you into the house that would serve you best, and quietly, without announcement, without ceremony, without a table to walk to or hands reaching out to welcome you. It also sorted you into the one that knew you most accurately. You have been in both this whole time. You just didn't know the second one had a name. It doesn't. That was always the point.